Hi everyone, delonewolf here and welcome back to EVE Talk, your weekly look at the market in EVE Online. And well, I've been playing some Winter Nexus last week. I actually completed the 900 points, mostly through the combat track once you get into the Rattlesnake. It's maybe not optimal, but it's super easy to run the sights in the Rattlesnake, and as a result, I found my pace and I managed to get all of those rewards. I'm pretty happy about that. The holidays are coming, of course, so let's be honest, on the development front, we shouldn't expect too much. And well, it's been a while, but I actually completely forgot about and missed the live stream that CCP organized here for the game, so I don't really have any comments or insights to do about something that I know nothing about, because I completely missed it. Sorry about that, guys. Other than that, I think honestly that I'm still in the same mode when it comes to my expectations for the game. I think right now with the holidays, it's not the easiest time to put out a lot of dev work, I think. So I'm honestly thinking that CCP is still going to hold back and remain somewhat in maintenance mode until FanFest itself, where hopefully they can make a bit of a splash with cool announcements, a trailer, all the good stuff. Of course, all of that still also depends on how things will evolve with like Omicron and things like that. But yeah, let's hope that they manage to push through, that we get a nice FanFest, and that we get back on the hype train there. So let's take a quick look at the New Eden store then. I think we still have those Yaul Star skins. They are pretty cool with their cooldown, and if you've been mining lately, you also have the radioactive reclamation skins if you want, and then we get a couple of new apparels as well, but that's definitely the focus at the moment. The holidays, of course, and then the update around mining that just happened. When it comes to the services, we're not noticing anything special or on sale. You may have seen that my plex dropped a little bit. That's because I actually bought a rattlesnake skin. I used it so much. It is one of the best PvE ships, although granted, the Marauders have overtaken the rattlesnake since their buff. You know, it's basically also something that's accessible, Tech 1/faction, so I like it, I use it a lot, and so I actually bought a skin for it. Let's move on to the market itself. You may already have noticed, but that's for later, that minerals seem to be moving quite a lot. But let's start with some plex and stuff coming in at 250. There we go, and as always we will start with plex that, well, is still hesitating. I'm a little bit surprised by that. I thought that we would choose a direction a little bit more quickly, but yeah, for the average prices we are stuck a little bit above 2.75 million, easily absorbing the sale that CCP did, but basically just moving the price down and then not going back up or continuing to move down. So clearly we are hesitating in the plex market. Sellers are coming in just above 2.9 million, buyers are coming in at 2.75 million. That's in Jita itself, so decently wide margin, I would say, somewhat normal historically speaking, right? 200,000 discs, something like that, a little bit below 10%. I think it's quite normal. And then the Tranquility Trading Tower, we go down to just above 2.9 million, and the buyers, well, they're in competition with Jita, they don't move too much from that price range. So that leaves us with like 150,000. It's a little bit less margin there, but overall I would say that I'm seeing that hesitation with sellers not really able to push for higher prices, and then buyers having the patience to actually just stay below, well below 2.8 million, and getting enough of these buys in order to get these types of average prices. Next up, we've got the multiple pilot train certificate that did recover a little bit from the plex sale that CCP organized. So here up in December we got a bottom well below 1.4 billion, and then we moved up, but you can see here same thing, we are stabilizing well below the 1.5 billion on the chart. For sellers of the multiple pilot train certificates, a little bit above 1.4 billion, and buyers a little bit below 1.4 billion. I would say here a little bit of a difference that I'm spotting is that the margin feels quite a bit shorter, and the main reason for that, in my opinion, is plex has been basically hesitating for the entire month of December so far, whereas the multiple pilot train certificates oops, and I misclicked here, recovered and is currently basically coming together on the price point that the market agrees on. Then we've got the skill extractors next that are doing something different. That's interesting. We don't usually see a little bit of a difference between plex and the skill extractors, but here a little bit of downward pressure landing on 330 million for the average prices. 326 million now coming in for the sellers in the Tranquility Trading Tower, JITA at 328, so they're in fact seeing even more pressure at the moment, and the buyers are coming in at 320, basically selling pressure is what I'm seeing here for the skill extractors. The impact on the skill injectors should be pressure. Let's see if that's true, and it is. We are seeing a little bit of pressure, but the big difference is that we're seeing that right after we basically plateaued at a 1-year high point of around 680 million for the last 2 months or so. So this is a little bit of late pressure. 675 million for the sellers, 638.39 for the buyers. Yeah, it's maybe a bit of margin that opens up from these plateau prices, but it's still not a lot. For sure. So at the moment I would say that we are seeing a bit of pressure, which is basically also translating that skill extractor pressure right here. Small skill injectors have had more of a wavy pattern, sometimes breaking above. I think this is going to be the 140 million mark for the average prices. At the moment, just on ending, I would say a downward pressure. Let's see where we're at. 136 million for the sellers now, so that's that sell pressure coming in. 141 in JITA and just below 130 million for the buyers. So these small skill injectors, basically a little bit more volatility in the price, but also under pressure from those 1-year high points. The daily alpha injector next, starting to move up here in the last couple of days, and then at the moment is actually settling back on that average that we've seen for most of the month of December, around 42 million ISK. 42 million for the sellers, 39 million for the buyers. Very interesting daily average pattern here that was then just knocked down. Perhaps with the event it was a little bit easier. It should then still be a little bit easier for the alpha players to get that daily goal going if you can master, let's say, a battleship that can handle the combat sites. I mean, you are getting a decent amount of ISK from running every one of those. It has to be decently easy to get 42-45 million in a single session from that activity. It's NPC sales as well, so you've got these NPC drops, so that should just be steady ISK flowing in. The real question is, how the hell did we then recover all of a sudden so far today? We'll see. Perhaps by next week we are seeing a more continued upwards pressure here for the daily alpha injectors, and then I would say that, yeah, the availability of the event, the Winter Nexus event, is probably gonna be the cause of that. Then finally we've got the hypercores that are touching 300,000 on the sellers, but same story as with plex and the skill extractors. We're basically seeing hesitation and even a little bit more pressure at the tail end for these hypercores. So the market definitely not convinced that we're back in an inflationary spiral or anything like that, as hypercores are now below 300,000 for the sellers, 281 for the buyers. Still a reasonable margin here as well. So I would say here we're seeing some pressure from sellers, but buyers are even pulling back a little bit as well on this. Volumes are clearly down for the hypercores. This brings us to the mineral market coming in at 9.5. There we go. Let's see if we can spot those, and you may already have seen it in the ticker, but yeah, titanium doing a very sharp move up, heading towards 5.5 ISK all of a sudden on the chart. So here is maybe a little bit of a delayed reaction to everything that was actually happening, but yeah, titanium is all of a sudden, in JITA at least, selling for 5.5 ISK pretty much, and buyers have been forced up to a 5.10 ISK. That's quite a lot. We do see 1 billion units coming in, another 200 million here, 200 million there, but it's very interesting to see this sharp move up in titanium. Let's see if any of the other high-sec minerals are following. Here is pyrite. Nope, still hesitating. So this one is going for 17 ISK for the sellers, 16.45 for the buyers. In fact, I would say there's even a little bit of pressure on pyrite at the moment. And then we get Mexalon. Let's see what this one is doing. Slight move up, but clearly not as pronounced as the titanium move. It's not that bad though, confirming that the price is staying above 62.5 on the chart. Almost 70 for the sellers, almost 65 for the buyers. It's a little bit of upward pressure in Mexalon as well. If I'm not mistaken, people did mention that Mexalon and pyrite will move differently from titanium because it is a side product from moon mining potentially as well. Whereas titanium, well, it is that most ubiquitous, also bulkiest and most needed mineral for Tech 1 production, and so this one is clearly doing its own thing here, all of a sudden heading to 5.5, not even on a lot of volumes. So I'm really curious if any of you guys have an explanation for this move. Then we've got the Isogen chart, and I like this, heading back towards that 1-year high point, almost getting back to a 125 on the chart. So to me this also indicates a little bit of selling happening as we reached a 120 range. Here you can see 58 million, 50 million, but that we're still in that same story, that these are old reserves that are finding their way to the market finally, because historically, right, they could have tried to sell below 50 ISK. People with you know, enough foresight and enough patience are clearly making a lot of ISK on that at the moment. But you can also see that like the latest sell orders, the very quick sell orders, are dominated by just a couple 100,000 units, and this is that regular supply, in my opinion, that active supply I'm gonna call it, that is currently sourced from low-sec, that is clearly way below those numbers. And while we still have to go through more of these Isogen reserves, the upwards pressure on the price is quite clear, and I'm really curious to see where Isogen is going to settle. Not sure exactly what we should be shooting for. I don't really have enough information on how easy / difficult it is to get Isogen. On top of that, I think that it's also going to be very dependent on what CCP actually announces. I still think the next step for resources is going to be a dynamic system that's also going to you know, have like drought phases and then resources that'll move around, and it will all depend if this will also have an impact on Isogen. We will of course have to wait and see, but for now I think that the trend is still clear, and that eventually we'll still chew through these, and then get to that 120.30 easily. There's definitely quite a bit waiting in the wings for this, but if we then go down to like the the sell orders, here's 200 million that are being sold at 500 ISK. So there is someone that's expecting 18 days to get there. I don't think that's going to happen, but there is someone that had this basically his long-term expectation for Isogen to hit 500 ISK. Is that going to come true? We don't know. I'll be honest, I really don't know. It could be a lot higher than it is now, in my opinion, although that's more a feeling than anything calculated. For the Noxium chart, we basically managed to get above 1250 and are then stalling a little bit, back to 1190 for the sellers and 1125 for the buyers. Still pretty damn expensive Noxium at the moment, and you can see that we basically peaked just like in August and in September towards that 1250. So this does seem to be the range for Noxium, and let's be honest, from 1000 to 1250, that's a 25% move up, right, a quarter of that 1000 ISK. That's not insignificant, and this could just be enough motivation for low-sec dwellers, perhaps even some low-sec groups, to get in on that Noxium production. And this is far more what I would also eventually expect for Isogen to see, that is more of a wavy pattern. Oops, misclicked there again. Much more of a wavy pattern within a certain range that's definitely decently expensive at the moment, in order to show that what's happening in low-sec, what's happening with supply demand, rather than either very depressed prices and prices that are stuck in certain regions for a very long time. That's when hundreds of millions and even billions of units are brought to the market at the same time, or here a very clear upwards trend that is of course due to the changing situation. Next up, we've got Zydrine. Let's take a look at this one, confirming the upwards move here, staying above 1000 ISK and continuing that on a slow trend. 1083 for the sellers and almost 1000 ISK for the buyers. I'm still reading this as the same thing. Less supply coming from nullsec, not because there's less available in general, but because of the Rorqual nerf. It just takes a little bit more time, I think, in nullsec to get enough Zydrine to also bring it to the market. And then something that I think no one expected, but here it is, a Megasite jump up to 800 ISK. That's a third of the price all of a sudden. Massive increase. We are starting to come back down on supply quickly. We're down to 763, excuse me, for the sellers and 651. Don't even see that much on the volumes. I mean, a little bit of buying here just at the start of this move up, but that's another massive move all of a sudden in Megasite. Just like with Tritanium, not what I was expecting, but an upwards revision for the cost of minerals should be on the books now for a lot of the manufacturers and for people like myself that have been mining and hoarding, you know, on the announcement that what would happen to the Rorqual, to the Orca and things like that. It does look like if you have some Megasite resources out there or some Tritanium based resources, which I do, actually have a lot of compressed Veldspar, then this could be a nice sell opportunity. Finally, we've got the Morphite chart that is now landing on 50,000 ISK, so yet another leg down and back where we started off last year. 57,000 for the sellers, 53,000 for the buyers. A little bit more volumes. I'm still holding to my same expectation here. Of course, these types of volumes aren't mined since the patch, so a little bit of market move, some market moves, right? Some speculators are in on this as well, in all likeliness, but I still do think that the doubling of availability, the first one that'll take advantage of this is of course the most expensive mineral, which is Morphite. That's why we're seeing that price drop. So very interesting week in minerals, and the percentage moves are quite significant. It's coming up now on the ticker normally. Tritanium up 11%, that's not nothing, so good news for high-sec miners. Oh, maybe another thing here, obviously Tritanium needs to be mined in high-sec as well, and maybe the event is getting some mining potential off of the field. If you think that that's the reason, let me know in the comments, because then it's definitely time to sell. Next up, we've got the PI market. That's coming in at 1735. There we go, and you can see Megasite actually up almost 30%, so that's not bad. Let's move in on that PI. Here are the broadcast nodes that are confirming the trend break, which is also, I think, kind of normal. We should eventually stop that descent on the announcement that CCP is going to revise large ship production and is going to basically nerf the amount of PI needed. And that's, of course, broadcast nodes, for instance, were already dropping from a one-year high point of 2 million ISK, but the decline just was unstoppable on that announcement. And then CCP, whoops, did I just click on something? CCP also teased or announced that perhaps they were going to add PI materials to moon mining, which, you know, the players did not agree with, but that was not very healthy for broadcast nodes either. And as a result, we went down to almost a million ISK, losing 50% of its value over the matter of maybe 2 months or so, but we're starting to turn the corner on that. I don't think CCP is going to add PI materials to moons anymore. I think players have been quite vocal that, you know, it's not those base materials that are the problem, obviously not. So we'll of course keep an eye on all of this, but for now I think broadcast nodes will be moving back up a little bit. Almost 1.4 million for the sellers, 1.3 million for the buyers, and I think it just flew by. So yeah, definitely recovering a little bit of those losses. Let's see if that's a trend amongst all advanced PI materials. Construction blocks are back above 7,000 ISK, which historically is still not a great price, but at least a bit of recovery here as well. 7,150 to 6,900 for the buyers. That's a pretty narrow margin. Perhaps a little bit more demand is coming in. Construction blocks back below 6,000 ISK, 6.2 for the sellers, 5.8 for the buyers. So clearly still very cheap as as well. And then coolants are making their way back to 10,000 ISK, historically a normal price for coolants. 10,000 for the sellers, heading towards 11k pretty quickly, and then 9,700 for the buyers. Quite aggressive buying here in coolants. Cryoprotection solutions making their way up. Did I miss something? Was there a hint or something like that for new implants that was given somewhere? But this is quite a sharp increase. Let's see where they're selling. 124,000 for the sellers, 108 for the buyers. Well, let's call it what it is. This is a sell opportunity. If you've been following Eve Talk throughout most of the summer, I have been mentioning that buying cryoprotectant solutions below 100,000 ISK was definitely a potential move. You are gambling, of course, on eventually something happening, like CCP announcing a new implant set, but eventually that was bound to happen. And although I haven't seen the announcement myself, the market has created this sell opportunity. So if you bought below 100,000 ISK and you're able to sell at 124, you are definitely getting a 20% profit on this trade. It takes a long time. That was always the name of the game, right? During this period here, I constantly mentioned, try to buy as low as possible. Never buy everything that you need in a single buy. Just make sure that you can, continually stock up at these really low prices. And you can see here, we had daily averages below 90,000 ISK. That all of a sudden becomes 35,000 profit on that. That's more than 30%. That becomes a nice and juicy trade. If you get some of that lying around, you definitely have the opportunity. But there it is, cryoprotectant solutions, big volumes, and a nice sell opportunity finally. Enriched uranium is pretty much stuck just below 9k, I think, 9,100 to 8,850. Definitely a narrow margin in all of these, showing slightly stronger demand in my opinion, but still not great. Integrity response drones, yep, confirming indeed that we are turning the corner on this, in fact getting back towards 1.7 million, almost that for most sellers, and then almost 1.6 million for the buyers as well. Our mechanical parts are back at 8,000 ISK, historically still not great, but it's not 6k from the consumer electronics. 10,000 ISK or something like that for mechanical parts is normal. 8,300 to 7,700, slightly more margin here, but clearly the best price we've had all year. Then we've got some nanites that are still under pressure, 5,000 to 4,900, so that's not great. Nano factories though, again, the turning of the corner, confirmed back above 800,000 ISK for the sellers at 880, actually going up towards 900 pretty quickly. 750,000 for the buyers. They're still holding out, but I think the movement is going to be unstoppable, as right now we can expect basically availability to stay pretty much unchanged, but the need in larger ships to go down, but that just means, in my opinion, that more opportunity for large ship production will materialize, and so demand could actually stay quite strong. Organic mortar applicators, there had to be someone that does not confirm the trend. This one is going back down to less than 700,000 ISK. Well, actually here we go, sellers back at 750 and buyers at 700,000 ISK. So this move down here is already stopping and we are going back up. Recursive computing modules, still a bad chart, below 1 million, yeah, 1 million, just below 1 million for the sellers, 916,000, less than 100,000 ISK between sellers and buyers though, so hopefully we can turn the corner here as well. Then we've got our robotics, 65,000, yeah, for the sellers, 63 for the buyers. Again, uncharacteristically narrow margin between these two, showing that demand is there, but for now it's not really able to break any records, although we're still not bad for this last year at 65,000 for robotics. If you remember historically, 100,000 ISK was not a special price either. Self-harmonizing power cores turning the corner back to 1.5 million and above 1.4 for the buyers as well. Demand is back. Sterile conduits, same story, back at 1 million. Sellers above 900,000, buyers above 900,000. Komi superconductors also not bad. On this 1 year chart, you're actually looking at decent prices for a lot of the PI materials. 77.5 to 77,000, also like 10% margin, pretty normal despite the slightly higher prices. And finally, the Wetware mainframes clearly formed the bottom below 1.4 million and back at 1.6 for the sellers and 1.55 for the buyers. Again, demand is back and is pushing these advanced PI materials back up. It's pretty good to see that this has materialized across most of them. I think that this will give industrialists for larger ships a little bit of breathing room while maintaining higher demand for these goods as well, which is good news for PI producers, of course. Next up, the advanced MO materials at 25 minutes. 25.00, but first I'll grab a quick drink to make sure I can keep going. There we go. And let's get started as always with the carbide materials. Here is crystalline carbide for Galente production. Yeah, basically back above 175. That margin from the start of the year is back. The volatility from the industry changes in April have been absorbed. We're in that situation, in my opinion. 182 to 178, pretty narrow margin here yet again. Let's see if the Caldari one confirms it. Here is titanium carbide. Yeah, very flat, staying above 175 as well. So it's that same story. And obviously the biggest winner here in April went up to 350, currently costing 180, buyers 177. That's pretty damn narrow between sellers and buyers as well. Then we've got ferrite carbide for Minmatar, starting at 125, is below 175, but again, the relative difference is probably pretty much the same. 166 to 160 is definitely, yeah, same story, and you can here see again a little bit of volatility that was also exacerbated by the war, because the Imperium liked to fly a Tech 2 hack, that was Minmatar, but other than that, completely gone, and we're paying a bit more, but that's it. And then we get tungsten carbide right here. That is, yeah, was below 150, is again below 150 as well. This one is clearly hesitating and maybe suffering from a little bit of overproduction. 146 to 142. Let me know if there's like a big organized group that's outproducing the others or something like that. It's definitely possible, but this could mean lower MR prices, because here I do feel like the margin between the start of the year and the current price is a lot lower than in the others. For the metamaterials, let's see if there's any moves here. Galente, so that's photonic. Oh, yep, all right, coming out of the blue, but looks good for volatility, which is what we actually enjoy. Very sharp increase. Was at, what is this price around here? 11,000 ISK. And is now up to 17, almost 18,000 for the sellers, almost 16,000 for the buyers, and the high point was at almost 20,000 ISK for photonic metamaterials. Out of the blue for me. Let me know in the comments if you have any idea where this is coming from, but definitely a sell opportunity if you had the balls to buy a lot of these. Basically here, for instance, below 11,000 ISK, no, must have been possible in the last 2 months or so. Good news, I would say. Potentially I'm seeing this ripple through to Tech 2 ships, which is also a place where I would love to see a little bit more volatility. Let's see if we can find some more. Here is non-linear metamaterials for Caldari, basically stuck at that low end at the moment. We're talking 19,000 for the sellers, almost 19,000 for the buyers. So here is your gamble, of course. This is what just happened with photonic metamaterials when the chart looked like this. Here are the nonlinear metamaterials, and the chart is looking like this. You're buying below 19,000 ISK. It may not materialize, but I'm kind of hoping that we are gonna start to see some market plays here and there. Then we've got the plasmonic metamaterials for Minmatar, very flat, unfortunately not at a low point, so I wouldn't risk it here. 18,000 for the sellers, 17,500 for the buyers, very narrow margin. And finally terahertz metamaterials for Amar, back at 15k, pretty much average here as well, a little bit below that, but then only a 200 ISK margin here, so basically not much to say, except that if you're looking at this one and then this one, it could be the right time to invest a little bit in non-linear metamaterials. For the other advanced materials, here is fermionic condensates having to give back some of those gains already. Not good, but at least it's not a sharp drop off, 63,000 to 58,000. Definitely seeing a bit of pressure on this one. After recovering, ferrogel had a little bit of volatility. Here is the response. 1 year low point for ferrogel, 27.6 to 27.6. So that's basically, we're forming a bottom here. Your decision. Really, honestly, I would not blame anyone to start to look at 1 year low points in advanced materials to be buy opportunities for trades, because here obviously 42 and then down to 27.5. That's a very sharp drop off, but that would also have been a very nice sell opportunity. Let's see if we can spot some more volatility. Unfortunately for fullerenes, yeah, stuck a little bit above 700. That's not that great. 726 to 722, super narrow margin here again. Hypersynaptic fibers did not, you know, pretty decent move up to 11,000 disc, and we're dropping off quite sharply towards a 1 year low point here yet again. How close to 8k are the buyers? Fortunately, they're a bit aggressive. 8.6 for the buyers, 8.9 for the sellers. Nano transistors. Back to 4.5, yeah, a little bit of a drying up. I don't expect this one to really completely break out to like a 5.5, 6,000 disc or anything like that, unfortunately. But basically, if you were looking for that low point, you're a little bit late as well. Phenolic composites still, yeah, not great, not showing too much in volatility. I think pressurized oxidizers not spotting anything, and the reinforced carbon fibers, yeah, the new products. Hopefully at some point they'll show something. And then ceramic fibers still very low as well, buying below 300. Yeah, you can buy below 300 disc. Same story, this is close to buying at a 1 year low point. You could you know, consider it if you think that at least there's some of them and that volatility is starting to come back into the market. Well, let's see if this translates into some volatility in the Tech 2 chips. That's where I would place my bets, and where I have been placing my bets, trying to buy at the lowest possible points. So Tech 2 chips 31.45. Let's take a look at these. Here is the Basilisk. A little bit of pressure, unfortunately nowhere near a 1 year low point, not even a 2-month low point, so that's not where I would want to move in, but at least we're seeing some pressure. Below 200 million for the sellers, 183 for the buyers. 183, let's see if we can, that's down here already. Maybe if you really want to risk a Basilisk purchase, you can see that we don't have that much demand here. You could consider it, in my opinion. Interesting, I did not expect with this chart to have buyers at 183. Then we've got the Cerberus, that's, yeah, seeing a little bit of pressure in the last couple of days, but also nowhere near the 200 million bottom. 228 to 20829 though, so here again a bit of margin is starting to open up. The one difference is, while we have very decent supply, look at the last 24 hours, full front page, demand still hasn't dried up just yet. So maybe with a bit of patience we can knock these out and then get towards that 200 million. Yeah, I'd have a little bit of patience, but I would keep a close eye on the Cerberus for potentially a buy opportunity. Then we've got the Guardian. Yeah, unfortunately, that's not enough volatility for me to say we're gonna start actively trading, and it's also not where we want to buy. But you can clearly see that in early December here, you had a nice buy opportunity to buy some very cheap Guardians. Right now it's 184 and we're below 170. Let's see if we can get that on the charts. You know, that's not that bad. So if you haven't bought your Guardian just yet, you can still consider doing so. Then we've got the Hound. There we go. That's not bad. Selling at 33.3 million. Buyers still down to 25 though, so it won't last very long, but we actually have a Hound sell opportunity, and well, it was 2 months ago, but then we did break that 1 year low point. I can't imagine I didn't mention that this was a buy opportunity for Hounds here. You could have probably bought close to 20 million. You're already looking at a 50% profit pretty easily here on a Hound trade. That, granted, took 3 months to materialize. But I have been warning about that. That would have been my tactic all along, since at least the summer, when we were starting to really drop off from those April, May, June numbers. Yeah, I was looking to buy really as low as possible, being very careful there on the charts, but this hound purchase was definitely on the books, and so then here you've got a nice sell opportunity all of a sudden. And the first one to show some real volatility, it's a Minmatar ship. Where the hell does that come from? No idea. I don't understand the market, but here it is, and in my opinion, together with advanced movements, very, very interesting first couple of bigger waves. The Ichthyrsa also showing some volatility at least, but currently back down, and I wouldn't do too much active trading in the Ichthyrsa. Honestly, 616, but you're buying below 600 million. Well, I just said I wouldn't risk too much in the Ichthyrsa, but if you can buy it below 600 million, which you can at the moment, and then you can sell it for 650, or you can sell it, here is a data point on even more volatility, for 750 million ISK, it becomes a lot of profit on a bigger trade, of course. So it's not easy, I'll grant you that, but yeah, Ichthyrsa purchasable below 600 million or very close to that price. Kind of interesting on this chart as well. Then we get the Ishtar landing on 200. I would definitely see us close to 190 on the buyers. So yeah, we're below 190 on the buyers as well. So here is the sell pressure. Look at that, last 24 hours, almost a full front page. Still have a little bit of the demand that's showing up in here, but you're buying at 190 million for the Ishtar. It's another possibility. I would say be careful on this one, maybe buy one, not too many of them, but the trade volumes of the Ishtar are quite respectable, and you have to believe that volatility might just be back. Manticore, unfortunately, still moving in that 25 to 30 million range, 25 for the sellers, buyers, excuse me, and 26 for the buyers. So that's a no. Finally, one where I wouldn't do too much. The Munin back under pressure as well. The problem is daily trades are very low on this one, so I would honestly need to see buyers well below 180, still 182, but you can see that demand is drying up and supply very much alive again in the last 24 hours, something that's traded this cheaply. Potential explanation on this one, if I'm not mistaken, I did read a thread about the live stream, and it was mentioned that CP was thinking, I think, or had the intention or the hope of bringing battleships back to the forefront, and that they would basically get buffed. So they were not going to change their production needs, but they were going to make them more powerful. And then, of course, the heavy assault cruiser meta could take a big hit on that one, which could be why the Ishtar is going back down a little bit, the Munin is going back down a little bit. But that's very, very speculative on my end. I honestly think that Tech 2 ships, compared to most battleships, are still, you know, very useful and in the league of their own. Here is then the Nemesis. I think, yeah, last week you had a buy opportunity close to 20 million or something like that. 21 now for the buyers, 23.5. Yeah, that's a no. On this chart, I would not be moving in. Oneros back under pressure. Let's see where those buyers are at. Yeah, below 160, 171, but I think we've mentioned that before here as well. If you want to buy a cheap Oneros, I wouldn't blame you, but I would not go above 1. Then we've got the Panther, bit of pressure here, but not much. 1.1 billion, 1.2 for the sellers, almost 1.1 for the buyers. So clearly here we're meeting at the current price point, which kind of confirms what we've seen in the advanced movements. You're paying a premium from last year, but the volatility has clearly decreased, although again the first couple of volatile items are back. Let's hope it's a trend. The Purifier is slowly edging to 25 million, so that's going to be another no, I think. 25 to 22. Yeah, we need to be lower on the buyers before we move here. Scimitar dropping off though, 1 year low point, very interesting. We're talking 184 for the sellers, 171 for the buyers. Let's see if we can get a 170 to show up on the chart. You're buying just above this line here. That's another yes for me. Absolutely, that falls within that, within what I'm looking for in Tech 2 at the moment. If you can buy 1 or 2 scimitars, right, volumes can get up to 50 and above. That makes a lot of sense to me to try to jump in on that. Then we get the Widow, a little bit of pressure, but again, not a trend break or anything like that. 1.2 to 1.1 billion. And finally, the Zealot. Okay, very interesting. Before in December, you could have probably bought this for a 175-ish or something like that easily. They're selling for 223, buyers coming in at 206, and this is probably going to be event related. That's maybe, I did read some comments that basically the event is perfect for some of our laser ships, which is also why the Legion is so popular in the event at the moment. But there we go. That's definitely another sell opportunity if you manage to buy some cheap Zealots, which was not that long ago. And I think we must have spotted this 1 year low point here. And thus we must have mentioned that, yeah, if you want to buy a Zealot, that might be the time to do so. You can already sell them right now at a nice profit. So it is good news. I think that we're starting to see some volatility back in the Tech 2 ship market. Still too early to say that this is going to be a trend and that we're starting to get away from that buy as low as possible and actually buy and sell, but you know, the first couple of spikes are finally back. Tech 3, let's take a look at these at 40.40. There we go. As always, we'll start with the destroyers, and the Confessor is going back below 45 million, 46 almost for the sellers, 42 for the buyers. A new supply still coming in, another 30-ish ships or so. This 101 here is gonna keep us in check for a pretty long time. Interesting how we are seeing a bit of inertia, I would say, in this market all of a sudden. Let's say a year ago, when I was really looking at all of these destroyers and they were nice and predictable, moving very quickly on differences in price ranges between the different destroyers. Here we're definitely starting to see some real lags, right? My prediction for this vessel eventually came out, but it took months for it to materialize. And here basically last week and the week before that and the week before that, right, we saw these 47 million, which we would have expected to really stop that new supply, because there are far better prices out there. But you can see it's still rolling in and it's still putting pressure on the price, despite the fact that this order was put down somewhere around here. So it's putting that spin in there, but what I did not expect is that we would have this rolling effect of continuing to go down here on the Confessor, and that we would just not stop seeing this supply, and that it would move, for instance, to the Hecate that moved up to 55 million. It's finally absorbing a little bit of that supply as well. We're down to 52 million for the sellers, 48 million for the buyers, but I would expect, we were used to, I would say, far sharper moves. I would have expected the Confessor to dry up instantly and the Hecate to drop off to, let's say, 50 or below 50 million by now. We're a week in and we're still paying well above 50 for the Hecate. So this seems to be the new way of looking at the tactical destroyer market, rather than having that very quick reaction to changes in supply demand, to oversupply, to a lack of demand. You need more patience, and those trades seems to take a lot more time. So the Hecate is currently going down, and unfortunately the Confessor is yeah, like well below that price, probably still the lowest, the cheapest one, and you're still seeing 30 of them roll in here. So this is something we have to keep in mind now. I think when it comes to those trades, those low points will probably take longer to materialize. It's not because everything else is finally normalizing and then you find the lowest, that's your jumping point. Everything has a little bit more inertia, it seems. Next up here we get the Jackdaw, flat at 50 million, 50 for the sellers, 45 for the buyers, and look at that, just less than 10 coming in the last 24 hours, which is kind of weird, right? Why would you bring in confessors when potentially you could bring in jackdaws? But it has clearly changed in the way all of this is working. So the jackdaw is still, in my opinion, very expensive. And then we get this Vapel that, yeah, is now plateauing finally at that 48.5 million for the sellers, 44 for the buyers. And so we did spot this trade, but I personally had gotten used to this sell opportunity to show up way sooner and be far sharper as well. Now you if you followed everything, you know, you could have bought Vapels below 40 million, and this is like your second week in a row where you could have had your 20% profit pretty easily, because they are selling at 48 million. Volumes are down a little bit, so we do need to have that patience, but in general this seems to be the case, and we have to keep that in mind when we're trying to make predictions for these markets. So if, for instance, right now you would want to jump in on anything, well, confessors are now below 45 million on average. You're buying them below 43 million. Yeah, I would have said, yeah, this seems like a no-brain buy right now, but what the Vapel chart here tells us is that we may need a little bit of patience, because we may go even lower, despite the fact that the confessor is already the cheapest one. And look at the Hecate, look at the Jackdaw, even this Vapel that's far less popular is way more expensive, and yet we still see 30 of them rolling in here, bringing down those prices. And this may just be the start. Demand just may be so low here that you may be able to pick him up eventually, perhaps below 40 million is. So we're gonna have to wait and see here, but it would be very interesting if in the next week we see even more pressure on the confessor, and if we can then buy below 40 million ISK, that's where I would love to make my move on the confessor, for instance. Then for the cruisers, we've got the Legion explanation right here, right? 210 million ISK to 15 to 16. In fact, for the sellers, almost 200 million for the buyers. And so the explanation is that this seemed to be the perfect tech tree cruiser for the current event for the combat sites. So that makes a lot of sense that we have these higher volumes, higher demand. Then next up is the Loki. Way less of an impact, which is interesting. I think the Loki is actually very popular and powerful at the moment. 200 million to 180 for the buyers, so you're buying relatively cheap Lokis below this price point. Completely different in chart and activity, obviously. Then we get a Proteus that's actually just recovering from a low point, 190 to 159 for the buyers. Yeah, we're definitely opening up a very big margin here between sellers and buyers. And then finally we get the Tengu. That's pretty stable at a slightly more expensive rate, I would say 200 million, 178. Really wide margins here between sellers and buyers. There's almost profit to be made if you have the patience to buy really low and then you're able to sell, but of course the volumes won't be that great. Tengu just in general, awesome PvE platform, so pretty expensive as well. Yeah, the Legion, clearly one of the winners of the Winter Nexus event. And then finally we've got the extra product, and that's going to be the ice products coming in at 47.10. So let's take a look at that. Manufacturing and research, materials and ice products. Let's see. So an unexpected massive bounce for Tritanium. Let's see if we can spot anything when it comes to ice harvesting. Double availability. I think not too many nerfs on that end. Let's start here with heavy water. That is currently shooting up in price quite heavily. Oh, that has a different explanation, of course. Potentially that's going to be the fuel that'll be needed not just in the Rorqual, but also in the Orca and also in the Porpoise. So here is a winner. Heavy water was selling for 50 ISK, is currently selling for 136. Buyers coming in at 115, very close to 1 year high points on the industry changes. So yeah, clearly very, very sharp move up. I think this was also why someone requested I take a look at ice products. Helium isotopes though, low point 750-ish, 730 in fact for the sellers, 680 for the buyers. So that's a little bit more what I would expect. I don't expect a massive increase in price because availability should be quite fine. Hydrogen isotopes next, close to 1 year low point as well, below 750. I'll just go through the isotopes first here to confirm the trend. Nitrogen isotopes 750 as well, and oxygen isotopes 750 as well. So these are clearly very depressed, and at the moment availability should be just absolutely fine, and there's no reason to expect these to go up in price. And then we've got the liquid ozone, same story. Unfortunately, if you're looking for high prices, that's not the nice products at the moment. Getting a little bit of feedback somewhere. 123 to 113, and then we get strontium, that's also very low. So for ice products at the moment, we're basically oversupplied if you're looking for the year average price, and everything depends on consumption, which is why heavy water is actually a winner when it comes to prices. Very, very expensive, almost tripling in price on the changes to mining. And there you go, guys. That's it for this EVE Talk. Thank you very much for watching, and as always, I'll see you next time.